This hearing is about the crimes committed by the Central Intelligence Agency against the American citizens and the decades of secrecy used to conceal them.
I watched all of the MKUltra hearings on Capitol Hill. In this video, we'll discuss some of the things that we already knew and some of the things that I learned from watching. Some of these things are shocking. Stick around. As someone once said, I forget who, it is shocking, not surprising. That's my new slogan when it comes to hearing about things that the US government has done and is doing. MKUltra is the name of a program, just one program, that involves the US government paying for researchers to experiment on US citizens, sometimes with their consent and sometimes without their consent.
In the federal prison in Lexington, Kentucky, a group of African-American inmates was segregated and fed what were described in the protocol as double, triple, and quadruple doses of LSD every day for 77 days.
Did they all survive?
We have no idea what happened to them. This has stuck with me ever since I wrote that book. What happened to them? Did they ever find out what was given to them? Did they think they were going crazy? Many people were experimented to death in that safe house in Germany that I visited. And people in the neighborhood told me they knew what was going on in that house and that people who were experimented to death are now buried in what used to be forest plots that are now covered over with
Do you think the
apartments.
German government knew what the U.S. government was doing? Do you think there was a partnership there or knowledge?
Yes. There is a memo that was written by the German Secret Service to Konrad Adenauer, the Chancellor of Germany, telling him Americans are here capturing citizens, capturing people and conducting extreme experiments which are in violation of German law. And Adenauer decided to put that aside and not to investigate.
The government eventually ended up torturing people in order to find ways to get them to do things like confess to things they didn't do, plant memories, remove memories, and much more.
I was intrigued by one of the statements that you made based on your research that the MKUltra program, they were actually successfully able to replace memories.
Some of the things that they were trying to do, it isn't even really clear what the goal was, as you'll see later on.
One of the most shocking things that we've determined is the Operation Midnight Climax.
Now, as confirmed in this hearing, it's something we already knew, is that this program created a lot of very notorious killers in our country. People like Charles Manson, Ted Kaczynski, and James Whitney were all a part of the MKUltra program. These were people who had experiments done on them. And some of the atrocities that these people committed were done while they were still a part of the MKUltra program. In fact, Charles Manson was arrested and released multiple times during his time while in the program. It's even suspected that people like Timothy McVeigh and other notable killers were also a part of similar programs. Now, Charles Manson was a guy who was a cult leader and organized a string of murders in 1969 through his followers known as the Manson family. Timothy McVeigh is the Oklahoma City bomber, Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber, and James Whitney was the organized crime boss in Boston. So what did I learn from watching all this? What's new? Well, one thing I learned is that all of the MKUltra files were ordered to be destroyed. And they were, or so they thought. They had destroyed so many files that they thought all of them were destroyed. But that's not the case. A small percentage, maybe even 1% or less of these files were missed. And the files we have now, the MKUltra files, are just the ones that they missed.
The men who ran it did not cooperate with investigators. They did not come forward. They committed another crime. They destroyed evidence. In January 1973, the director of the CIA, Richard Helms, prepared to leave office. He personally ordered the destruction of MKUltra records. The CIA official document in writing states, over my stated objectives, the MKUltra files were destroyed by the order of DCI Mr. Helms shortly before his departure from office. A separate internal account confirms that Helms telephoned Dr. Gottlieb directly and instructed him to destroy, quote, all files pertaining to drug research and associated activities. Then Gottlieb had his personal papers destroyed by his secretary before he retired. That is obstruction of justice. That is criminal destruction of federal records, and neither individuals were ever charged with a crime for it and collected his government pension until he died. Gottlieb retired in rural Virginia and wrote poetry. No one went to prison. No victim was ever formally compensated by the government for the harm that they caused. An archivist diligently complying with a FOIA request discovered 7 boxes of MKUltra financial records that had been misfiled and escaped the bonfire.
Now, this is rather concerning because if you're destroying files, you obviously start with the really juicy ones. So we only have information about just the ones they forgot, which are files on programs like the ones we think about when we think of MKUltra, plus 148 other projects which also conducted experiments on Americans that we know about. Even today, some of the files that still exist are heavily redacted.
The reason that probably the individuals involved in conducting and authorizing this activity are probably all deceased. What is the reason for the mass redaction?
Shame?
So it's possible that there have been thousands of like studies.
The number of potential victims, if you could hazard a guess. Is this
There were
hundreds?
149 programs that we know of that were subcontracted outside of.
149 separate programs.
Yeah, outside. And that's what we know of. Again, everything we know of is minuscule compared to what was really going on. So, I mean, that could have been into the tens of thousands.
Our tax dollars going to experiments being done on us. I also learned that many of the test subjects were children taken from juvenile detention centers. Some were military members and some were just ordinary citizens.
What were the average ages, if you know, of the people that were experimented on? Were these children? Were these middle-aged? Were they...
Well, there were adolescent studies done in juvenile detention facilities and jails with kids.
But not all were U.S. citizens. There's credible evidence to suggest that there were also other studies being done in other countries.
MKUltra conducted the most extreme experiments on human beings that have ever been carried out by a U.S. government agency. By any standard, they qualify as medical torture. These experiments took place in prisons, clinics, and safe houses in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, and even in Latin America. Officers of MKUltra were authorized to travel to foreign countries, preferably those under formal or informal U.S. occupation, and ask the local CIA station to provide them with expendables, human beings who would not be missed if they disappeared. Gottlieb had what amounted to a license to kill issued by the U.S. government. Neither the number of MKUltra victims nor the number of those who were experimented to death is known.
Now, the stated goal, as we mentioned, was mind control, trying to see if they could implant memories that didn't exist, remove memories, get people to confess to things they didn't do, and so on. And obviously, the goal of this is efficiency and proficiency. In other words, you want to learn how to do this in as short a period of time as possible. But what's missing from all this is the Fed won't talk about how far along they got. But they did talk a little bit about time frame back when this all started. So if it took more than 2 months to brainwash someone back then, how much time does it take now, some 60 years later? Well, we don't know because current information won't be released. The government doesn't say it doesn't exist, they say that they won't release it. But it is reasonable to assume that they were able to work that 70-something day number down significantly. Down to what? We don't know. Is it down to a matter of days? A matter of hours? We don't know the end results of that study or where we're at today, how long it takes to brainwash somebody. But one thing that is not disputed is that the government did pay for experiments and conducted countless experiments on how to brainwash U.S. citizens. This is not a theory. This is now stated as fact in Congress.
Project MKUltra was not a policy failure or an overzealous program that got out of hand. It was a deliberate, systematic governmental operation that subjected American citizens, prisoners, hospital patients, veterans, ordinary people to LSD, electroshock, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, psychological torture without their knowledge or consent, funded by American taxpayer dollars and authorized by the very top of U.S. intelligence apparatus. The men who ran it did not cooperate with investigators.
This calls so many things into question. I immediately thought of the person that the government is potentially framing for laying a pipe bomb in D.C. This 30-year-old, supposedly autistic man who was alone with the feds for a period of time and the feds say confessed to laying these bombs. Now, what happened when he was alone without witnesses or lawyers with the Fed that got him to admit, we don't know, but it is very suspicious, especially since an investigation was done that determined that man does not fit the size and gait and height of the person we have photo evidence of planting these pipe bombs. That closer matches this woman who worked for the Capital City Police. She later went on to be promoted, of course, probably works for the CIA now. Oh yeah, this woman was injured and has a handicap that has left her with a very distinct walk, a very distinct limp. And the suspect in these videos has that same limp and height and gait and everything that this woman apparently has. But I digress. All of this stuff rightfully begs the question asked by this congressman.
I guess my question to y'all first is, which lie do we believe?
In the MKUltra hearings, they also mentioned Operation Midnight Climax. Now, this is a real thing that the government admits to, and here's what it is.
One of the most shocking things that we've determined is the Operation Midnight Climax that occurred in the early 1950s, 60s, where the CIA had safe houses, where you had American citizens who were being lured into these brothels and then dosed with an hallucinogenic and then filmed during their sex acts.
So, being as that you're a guest of the show called Question Things, you might be tempted to ask, what was the purpose of this study? What were they hoping to learn? But there doesn't seem to be any purpose for this at all, other than that one guy in Washington enjoyed frequently visiting the CIA's makeshift brothel.
The remarkable aspect of that Operation Midnight Climax was that there wasn't even the pretense of scientific experimentation. The person watching behind the one-way mirror was a grossly overweight drug officer sitting on a portable toilet and drinking cocktails out of a pitcher. There was nobody there that was a scientist or somebody who understood sexual behavior or human psychology. So there was no science involved in it at all. I can add a little footnote. When I was researching Poisoner-in-Chief, I came across a document in which one of the officers involved in setting up that program, Operation Midnight Climax, said that Sidney Gottlieb himself used to fly from Washington out to inspect the project regularly and always asked that women be provided for him. So
that was my next question. Do you think that the agents were involved in the sexual encounters?
Well, and could that have actually been the reason why the bordello was opened? There was no prospect of any serious scientific result out of that project, given the personnel who were overseeing it. So those CIA officers, particularly Gottlieb, involved in overseeing Operation Midnight Climax, certainly were able to take advantage of what it offered.
One of the most bizarre things about the MKUltra hearings is that seemingly out of nowhere comes this woman representing the NIH.
I'm a health research scientist with a master's and doctoral degrees in psychology from the George Washington University. I spent 22 years from 2003 to 2025 as a scientific program official at the National Institutes of Health, managing more than $132 million in health research grants and co-authoring 18 federal funding programs. I left the NIH in April of 2025. I'm here today because what is happening to NIH right now is not reform. It is the replacement of scientific judgment with political control. Retroviral therapy and pre-exposure prophylaxis. Global AIDS deaths have fallen 54% since 2010.
I thought maybe I had left YouTube running too long and I had autoplay next turn on and it just went on to the next hearing or the next video. But after listening further, it turned out no. This woman was a part of the MKUltra hearing. The video had not ended yet. It sounded as though she perhaps walked into the wrong room by accident to give her testimony. And I'm not the only one who was thinking that it was a little bit out of place. Thank goodness. I thought I was going crazy for a second.
I noticed during your opening statement that you had nothing to say about the content of this hearing being about MKUltra.
You're here for what reason?
I am here to testify about what is happening to the NIH right now.
You're not here to testify about MKUltra?
I am not an MKUltra expert.
Why did the Dems send you here if you're not an MKUltra expert? But you don't know anything about MKUltra, which is the purpose of this hearing. All right, so I have a couple questions for our witnesses who are here to talk about MKUltra, and thank you, gentlemen. Dr. Kinzer.
It was not this woman's lucky day because since she was there, they just decided to ream her for what was on everyone's mind.
Would you deny that the NIH had involvement in the funding of the Wuhan lab?
I don't have any knowledge about any funding related to the Wuhan lab. Really should be letting science be driven by scientists and not by politicians.
Well,
because that's how we fund cures and make health progress.
Well, with all due respect, ma'am, do you find it ironic that for years we were told to trust the science, and then in the aftermath, we've all found out that most of what we were told during COVID was a complete lie, and it wasn't scientific at all? I don't think anybody up here would deny that there's never been anything good that's come out of the NIH and that you guys have done some good work, but you just brought up trust. Do you think the NIH has a trust problem based on how they handled COVID?
No, I do not. I think that the NIH is beloved by the American people because we know about the advances in human health and cancer treatments and heart disease and diabetes and all of the health gains that the research has produced.
Well, I think you're wrong, ma'am. I think the public has a serious mistrust issue with the NIH. Do you deny that the NIH tried to cover up the origin of COVID?
I'm not here to testify about that. That's not my area of science. I have no knowledge of that. And right now, we're ceding our leadership in biomedical research to China. That's what's happening right now.
Then she tries appealing to our competitive nature and hate for China. Good. Let China fund some research for a change.
What about covering up harmful side effects of vaccines and the role that the NIH has played in that? What do you have to say about that, ma'am?
The U.S. history of human subject protection has evolved greatly. Numerous research improprieties from the 50s to the 70s in the United States, including the Tuskegee syphilis study, forced Congress to establish formally federally
I'm not asking you about that.
mandated rules.
You know what I'm asking you about? I'm asking you about how NIH handled COVID. Obviously, this is supposed to be a hearing about MKUltra, but when you gave your opening statement, and I don't even know why you were called to this hearing because you didn't offer anything about MKUltra, but since you are here and you're going to defend NIH, I'm going to call you out on it. Do you see now what I'm talking about when you say that the NIH doesn't have integrity problems and trust issues? Did you hear the applause in this room? That should tell you right now that you're pretty tone deaf to what the public thinks about how the NIH handled COVID and the cover-up, not only the funding of it, but the cover-up involved in the aftermath. Can you acknowledge that?
I'm sorry, that's not my understanding.
Do you think the COVID shots harm American citizens?
No, I do not.
Do you know if the NIH or NIAID track COVID shot injuries or cancers or anything harmful from them?
I am not aware of any harmful tracking, and this is not my area of expertise, no.
What is your area of expertise?
So the unfortunate truth about this hearing, as it is with many hearings, the more experience you have watching this, the more jaded and disappointed you get. The unfortunate truth is that our representatives clearly can't do anything about our unelected part of government, commonly referred to as the deep state, which actually comprises most of our government. The deep state is not a conspiracy, it's a word for the unelected parts of our government that operate without oversight or any concern for what the American public wants. They operate in secrecy. There's obviously parts of that government that's not controversial. It exists. The disappointing thing that you start to learn from watching these hearings is that our representatives lack really any power. But it's not just that. That's just one thing. Even if our elected representatives wanted to do something about this stuff, they couldn't because they wouldn't even know where to start looking. There are something like 440 federal government organizations. That's more than one organization for every day of the year. So even though we call our representatives regulators, a representative of ours could not possibly regulate these organizations. There just aren't enough days of the year to investigate them. In fact, there's so much bureaucracy in government that there aren't even 444 confirmed organizations. No one really knows how many organizations there really are. Look it up. It's just that the best guess is something like 440 not secret organizations. This is not counting the secret organizations. So people like me say we need a financial audit of these departments, but a bigger problem is that we don't even know who to audit. And by some measures, the government is outpacing the US population. This is true on both the federal level and the state level in many states, but it's absolutely true at the federal level. Data from the Office of Management and Budget and US Treasury has shown that while the US population has grown by roughly 1.5 times since 1980, federal spending has increased by roughly 3 times over the same period, leading to a higher average spend per person, even adjusted for inflation. Now, as someone who likes to think of themselves as an independent thinker who questions things, it's astonishing to me that media has gotten us arguing over bipartisan things. Right now, Republicans want to increase the Department of War's budget from something like $900 billion to $1.5 trillion, not a small increase. And the Dems are saying the solution to all of our problems is just to raise taxes. Now, they're not putting it that way. They're trying to make it something more palatable, like saying, just add 2% more in taxes to wealthy people. Still, the fact is they want to raise taxes. And neither party accepts the real problem, which is the US government does not have an income problem. It has a spending problem. We must balance the budget before we talk about what we're going to spend more money on. The US's second highest expense is interest on our debt, which is actually the first highest. So it's actually the interest on our debt is our greatest expense right now. It is our largest line item because Social Security is somewhat fictional and won't exist, and it's basically being spent on fake money. So there will come a time when we are no longer able to even pay interest on our debt, never mind decide what else to spend our budget on, because we have no budget. So thank you for watching. Share this video with your representatives or people you like or hate. Or just don't. I don't care. I don't make money on it, so whatever. But if you watch the video this far, I truly love you. Thank you so much.